Go to the Discord settings and under notifications. Alrighty, everybody. Welcome to GameSense. We're in episode 6 of season 5 of the show. We're all really happy to be here. We're happy you guys are here watching us here on Twitch or on YouTube. So thank you so much for being here once again. My name is Francis O'Rourke. I'm going to be the host for the show today. Joining me today, I've got some great co-hosts and a great guest with me. Today joining me is Adrian Emerson. She's from Team 148. We've got Ty Tremblay. He's from Team 319. We've also got Nick Lawrence. He's from Team 3940. And our special guest today is Jesse Knight. Jesse's from Team 1885. Jesse, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I started in first in 2005 with an unknown team in Savannah because I was at Georgia Tech there. Basically did 2 years, didn't go to competition, moved to Northern Virginia for a job, and basically joined the closest team to me at the time. They needed a drive coach at the time, and I said, sure, I'll do it. And it's kind of stuck. So I really enjoyed it for a really long time. Tried to give it up a couple years ago, but nobody really wanted to take it. They thought I was doing a great job, so they said, you've got it. And so I stuck with it. I also picked up CAD. I'm a software engineer by trade, but I picked up CAD when we lost our CAD mentor. So it's been trial by fire, trying to understand how to actually design a mechanical system.
Awesome.
And as other mentors have onboarded onto 1885, I've taught them what I know. So.
Sweet. Well, that sounds great, Jesse. And it's served you well because you and your alliance partners this weekend won the Chesapeake District Championship. Congratulations on that win. We'll be seeing you in Detroit in a couple of weeks.
Yep. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Well, to round up the beginning part of the show, a couple quick things. First off, we're taking questions from you guys in the chat. So if you've got a question for us that you want us to talk about in the Twitch chat, just type !Q and then your question, and then we'll pick the question up. And if we like it, we'll ask it to everybody on air and talk about it here live during the show. Last thing before we get started and get into the front part of the show, I want to remind everybody that we don't take ourselves too seriously, and we hope that you don't either. Have fun, and if you don't like what we have to say, go out there and prove us wrong. It's more fun that way anyway. All right, so with all that being said, let's get rolling. So Jesse, again, like I mentioned before, you and your alliance won the Chesapeake District Championship. You were the first pick. Your team was the first pick of the number 8 alliance captain. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Cool. And you guys faced the number 6 seed in the finals.
Yes.
And I'm sure that a lot of people who've been watching first have kind of been curious why this buck wild situation between the 6 seed and the 8 seed happened in the finals. Do you want to kind of give us a little blow-by-blow as to what went down?
Sure. So qualifications are kind of a mixed bag. We all know that some people, sometimes you get lucky with your schedule, and if you have below average partners and you're against above average opponents, it's really easy for you to lose complete control of a match. And that's kind of what happened to us. We also didn't do ourselves any favors in a couple of instances. I know my team was trying to get automation working with some of our handoff elements of our robot. So that's why we were ranked above where we should have been, I think. And that happened to a couple of teams. There were some really good scale robots that I guess they focused on the scale and wanted to make sure they hit their scale autonomouses in this game where the RP is based upon the switch. It was kind of a crapshoot. So when it comes Saturday morning, it's time for alliance selections. Most teams understood that the best autonomous teams would get together. And 1731, who had the best scale autonomous in Chesapeake, was ranked first, 10-0, 12-0 undefeated. We also knew that 1629 had the best switch autonomous. It consistently got 2 cubes into the switch. And they had one of the best switch autonomouses in Chesapeake. So it was kind of a given that they would pair up, at least in my mind and a couple of other people's minds. We knew that was going to happen starting Friday morning if things continued. Then you've got a couple of great switch attack bots in the top 8. You've got 6334 and 888. They played the Switch game. They played it well. And 6334, that alliance they put together, I thought was one of the most dangerous alliances if we could get out of quarterfinals. And past that, from what I can tell on Facebook and Chief Delphi, everyone trying to explain why certain teams didn't get picked, people had a strategy, which was pick for autonomous and pick people you've played with well before. And I think that is important, and I'll get into why in a little bit. So as it came down, you had the number one pick, 1629. We knew right out of the gate that they would have pretty dominant autonomous routines. Worst case scenario, they would have 3 in the scale and 3 in the switch by our calculations. Because 1731 could put 2 in the scale, 1 in the switch, 1629, 2 in the switch, and then 339 actually had a pretty reliable side scale. 2 seed, 1262, pick 346. 346 has this really nice loft of a shot. It's probably one of the better shooters in that we'll see at Northern Champs. And in the early game, they could dominate. And so you really wanted to pick them because they would help you get that autonomous early. And then from there, it was, the top 8 alliances just kind of fell how they did. So
all right, so we're gonna play a match that you guys played in the finals, final match number 1, up on the screen for everybody to watch. And while that's playing, I want to ask you, so by now in this particular match that we're seeing here, you've already defeated the number 1 seed, which you said have a great autonomous mode,
right.
And you've already managed to make your way through the semifinals, and now you're playing against a 6 seed. How did you guys end up beating the 1 seed? What did you guys do to do that? Is there any black magic, or is it just better execution?
So beating the 1 seed, the number 1 rule as an 8th seed is focus on quarterfinals. Don't worry about any other match except for that one.
As a Patriots fan, I agree with that.
Well, so I gave you the cube counts of what they could do in autonomous, and that's because as an alliance, we kind of internalized that. We had to know about how far behind we would be. We also looked at our scouting data to understand where they like to place the robots. And that then led to the realization that we wanted the scale for blue to be on our right, because that was our best case scenario. It's the first time I've had that realization as a drive coach all season. I want the scale in a specific place.
When you say that, you mean like the randomization, right?
Yes. 50-50 shot to get the scale in the right place. So we basically just started choreographing what if scenarios, and then came to realize we wanted our switches on the left, because as we figured out, so 384 and 1885 have played together a couple of times before, and it's gone really well. We know when to seed right of way. We know if who's coming back, what side of the, should pass on the right, pass on the left, that kind of stuff. We've done that before. And so we also knew that I personally like to choreograph the first 10 seconds of teleop. Where do you end autonomous? When you jump forward to the controls, what are you doing? Your thumbs are just going to do something. What are they going to do?
Right.
And so we went over that over and over and over for the 4 different combinations of the field configuration.
And that's important for this game, because you need to figure out, okay, who's getting cubes where. Otherwise, you're just going to trip over each other in that first 10 seconds and lose valuable time.
Exactly. And if you notice in the both quarterfinals matches, we happen to get our best case scenario field configuration. And even in that best case scenario, Festa 1731 was still able to get 2 cubes to our 1 into the scale. And so in talking through our strategies and alliance, after alliance selections, we knew that would be about 40 points, period. They would be up on us 40 points because of how long it would take us to make up that deficit. And in quarterfinal match 1, that proved to be pretty difficult to overcome. So you actually see us at the start of teleop, we split. We talked through who would go the far platform zone, and who would go to the near platform zone. I'm always a fan of not trying to put two robots in the same place at once. I learned this way back when my first year drive coaching. I was with 340 in a match at Worlds, and we decided we would split the rack, and we somehow miraculously got 8 tubes in a row. It was pretty sweet. Since then, that was a valuable lesson. So now everything we do as with a partner, we split. We go different directions. We also figured out that because of where robots would end autonomous, we would be able to attack one of their platform zone cubes that was on the corner and possibly cut 339 off, because we figured that they would be a switch attack bot or a scale bot. But in order to cross the field to get to where they needed to be, they would have to cross one of our robots. We would force that issue. What we didn't realize until after quarterfinals, we watching some of our matches, we have a parent who brings me video. I didn't realize how impactful that actually was. It basically cost them about 60 seconds worth of time, and it was the most critical 60 seconds, the first 60 seconds. And so I think that really helped us a lot. So choreographing the first 10 seconds, figuring out how to be most efficient with our own cubes, and then impeding our opponents. And then the last thing, I know, Nick, you analyzed our matches yesterday. We talked about sightlines, and this came from 384 and us playing together last year, where sightlines were kind of critical, because you'd go around blind corners at 16, 17 feet per second and crash into a robot. Well, this year, I made sure we geared for much slower, because I guess their average sprint distance would be about 12 to 13 feet. So we're way slower. However, you still have big dead zones in the middle of the field where it turns out the alliance captains themselves can't see. And so in quarterfinals 2, I think maybe 45 seconds in, you've got 3 cubes in the red platform zone. They're squished together, and you've got 384 just bypassing them completely. They went to the portal. And you also see 1731, they're in the platform zone, but for some reason they go around to their pyramid stack. The reason is because nobody can see those cubes except for the 4 teams in the corner driver stations. 384, we talked about their sight lines. How comfortable were they going into the far platform zone? They said, we can maybe get the first 1 or 2, but after that, once they get into the middle, it's just faster for us to go to the portal.
Right.
So drawing at, we took maybe 20 minutes. We were getting hangry because, it was lunchtime. Talking through all of these things and kind of knowing the right questions to ask and having the right plans. And then at the start of autonomous, realizing that the field configuration is exactly what you need. I think those are what led to the upset.
Shoot. Wow. Oh, Adrian's gotten into the darkness. Gotta save electricity. So I gotta be honest with you. So I was a field coach for a few years as well. I don't think I ever went into that much detail before a match, but I've also never won.
Yeah.
So
I blame the poofs. We had a match with them in 2015. Where you did choreograph everything.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And you learn a lot from those kind of situations where how you this year, how you set yourself up for teleop. You don't have to have the best autonomous as long as you have a great to start to teleop. And so just walking through all of these things, you just kind of draw them out.
Yeah. Sorry about that, everybody. Ty, make sure to unmute your desktop audio. I think you didn't quite come through that on that last line there, but I gotta agree with you guys that like one of the things that frustrates me the most when I start watching matches is when the match begins and two people kind of just like do nothing and they're like tangled up with each other. I didn't think that it was possible to generate that kind of if scenario for all the permutations of the field and actually be able to execute to it. So something I noticed about you guys' alliance, and everybody else, you can jump in if you saw these matches, thought about it, is that you guys, your three robots were actually probably the best number 8 alliance I've seen all year. And
absolutely,
you would definitely take the cake for a number of like top seed alliances at other district or regional events. How is the depth at CHS? I know that there's kind of a I'll be frank, right? Frank isn't gonna be frank that there's an idea that CHS district is not terribly competitive, right? But it seems like you guys have a thick glut of teams somewhere in the middle that work well.
We in Chesapeake have made great strides in bringing up the bar for the low end teams, trying to get them into the middle. It's still somewhat every team for itself trying to get from the middle to the top.
Right.
And then we realized that if you take our top 5% of teams, it's like an above average team to some other regions of the country. As far as, and we're working on that, so we have what we call our enabling technologies, and I think 2363 has been pushing a lot of things to help some of the lower resource teams get some of these enabling technologies, like basic 3D printers and also how to use them, and then also a basic speed controller and how to prototype. They've led a lot of workshops with that. But I think as far as how the 8 seed alliance formed, when you're dealing with alliance selections, I know that I have never worried about I can't let these two teams pair up. I personally direct my team and all the other mentors encourage our scouts to pick based upon who we think we're most effective with, irrespective of other teams. Now, I know as 8th seed, you need to take a risk, right?
Right.
And it turns out 384 did take a risk on us because our Saturday matches were not that great. We had just switched to a new operator to try and get somebody who had a little bit of experience under pressure, and then she made some requests in code, and we worked as hard as we could to get those done. And then for the first time, I'm not going to go too far into this. It just makes me salty every time I think about it. But for the first time, we actually got practice field time at 12:20 on Saturday.
All weekend?
All weekend. There were some teams that just monopolized it.
It's not good.
What that meant is nobody knew we were drilling our two drivers together, and you can't really test your intake unless it's on carpet and you're driving. And so every time where we've had this big uptick in our performance, it's because we finally got the robot to carpet off the field. So that's kind of what happened. So I know a lot of teams in Chesapeake like to pick each other because they're comfortable with each other and they perform well enough. There are a couple of teams that were left on the table, or a couple of other teams that I thought were picked too early, but it's all based upon your scouting strategy. Do you do it based on raw stats? Do you do median? Do you drop Thursday matches? That's my preference.
Right.
There's also, I know my team at the end of Friday didn't really have any one superior stat as far as how many cubes we did anywhere. But if you aggregated all of our cubes, you realize that we were kind of running around making up for partners that were losing the switch, right?
You're playing the game, not just piling all the cubes in one spot.
Yeah. And so the 8th seed happened because 384 took a risk on somebody they knew could bring something to the game, and then 422, I'm surprised they didn't go earlier. They actually, we watched all their matches at 2x on YouTube, and they were actually really good at scale, especially in the early game, which is where it's most critical.
Yeah, so. I agree. I'd like to hear from other folks here so my team, we haven't really managed to be in a picking position this year. But for you guys, how do you guys, not asking to give away all the secret sauce. Thankfully, Clinton's on here because him and his students would get angry. What do you guys look for when you're picking your partners? What do you use for data? Do you use data at all, or do you guys just kind of go completely qualitative?
Mm-hmm. Right.
If you can't hear Ty, we're sorry about that. Ty, make sure you've got a desktop audio unmuted on OBS. Uh-oh. Well, we'll figure that out later. But Nick, what do you want to say about your stuff?
I'll fill in for you for a minute for you, Ty. We take a pretty statistical approach to it. In the sense, the first sort for us is who's good at cubes. Like that seems kind of obvious, but it's not as simple as people think. You're not looking at just how many cubes did they put on the scale. You're looking at how many cubes they play with through the entire match. We're firm believers in both number of cubes but also cycle time. Thankfully, the 3138 fire scouting system that we switched to this year, which is freaking awesome, by the way, is really good at accounting for what a robot does through a match, not just how many cubes it does. So we basically have this wonderful dashboard in front of us of the story of everybody's matches. We kind of sort that first, and then we go, okay, we have this pile of tier A, tier B, and tier C robots. And we go, okay, who are we most scared to play against? And usually that ends up being a conversation about who has 2 cubes or even 3 cubes in auto, because you really don't want to play behind coming in a teleop, right? We definitely pick the data first, who you scared of second, and then who do we know third, probably in that order, which is a bit different than some teams, because some teams they'd rather go a little more conservative and pick known values and pick their friends and pick what they know what they're going to get.
Emerson, how about you guys? Not to spill all the beans, but
I think we're even gonna switch up what we've been doing this season, even just for champs, because we've every time we go to competition, you learn a little bit more about the game, you learn a little bit more about what you want in a partner, how to capture that in your scouting data. But I think this game is so interesting because, like Jesse was saying earlier, if you play the game, your stats don't necessarily reflect that you're good. I guess I think like our average cube on the scale in quals in Colorado was like 2.7, which seems bad, but if we weren't going against anybody that was going to be scoring in the scale, there was no reason to put more than 2 or 3 cubes up there, especially if we had a partner that could help us with that. And so we've been looking at number of cubes in each area. We also record paths, where cubes started and where it ended. We have been talking to a few other teams that have been incorporating like cycle times and things like that. So we're looking into some stuff like that too. But this is a really hard game to scout.
Oh my goodness, it is.
I mean, it's we had kind of a skeleton crew in Colorado, and I was in the trenches filling out data sheets all day and doing that stuff. And it's hard to get a really good picture of who is doing well on the field with just numbers. And so I really think that you have to have some good people up in the stands really paying attention to robots that at your scouting meeting or when you're making your list can really say, I know what the numbers say on this team, but this is what I think their abilities are. Or this is what I've seen them do. And they were doing, even though they only scored 3 cubes this match, they scored them in exactly the right places, exactly the right time. And they know how to play the game. So this is probably one of the most difficult games that I've ever scouted for, at least.
One of the things we do to help with that one, Adrian, is we have a feeling number where you basically give the team a rating from 1 to 5, where 1 is bad and 5 they're something amazing, like 148 shutting down 3 robots playing defense at Waterloo, kind of amazing. We use that as a rating number. What did you think about it? And it seems to be a pretty good sort for us to help try to sort some of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I know a lot of different people do it, do it in a lot of different ways. And yeah, I think that this year more than ever, that is an important thing to
Right.
have some sort of data or something on. So I think it's been interesting in that in that respect, and I think it's been fun to see different events and how people are choosing different alliances. And I think one of the 118 guys said to us after Colorado, like, I had no idea like why you picked your third pick, and then like I looked at something else, and they were like, oh, okay, like that totally makes sense now, but we weren't paying attention to that, so they weren't on our radar at all. So, and I think I've seen a lot of that in a lot of different competitions this year. So,
How about, all right, we're gonna try this one more time. We're gonna see if I can, if the audio is gonna go through. I think I fixed it, but
I hope.
When it comes down to picking for 319, for example, at UNH, it was kind of cut and dry for us for our first pick, in that the only basically the only robot we thought that we could lose to in the scale battle was 1519, and you can't lose to them if they're on your alliance.
Fair enough.
So we picked 1519, and they ended up being very compatible with us with our autos, and it worked out really great and was awesome. But the third pick was a lot tougher, and we resorted essentially just down to just raw exchange numbers for that one.
Oh.
And we ranked everybody based off of how exchange went, and then luckily we had locked up the number 1 seed going into the second day of the district. So we conferred with 1519 on the next morning to get all of our pick lists in order, and we somehow ended up on the number 1 alliance with the robot that could fill the vault with 50 seconds remaining. The only time they didn't fill it every time is because we kept stealing cubes from their pile and they ran out.
I need these cubes. Sorry, bro.
So yeah, it's like
It makes you wonder how that robot doesn't get picked earlier. I tell you.
Right,
Well,
right. It's tough. I think the one thing that's going to start becoming really, really, really important as we get to these district championships and championship elimination alliances is the fields are going to be so big, and for example, at district championship are going to be so deep that you're definitely going to need to do something along the lines of what 1885 and 384 did in picking an alliance that will work well together and has the qualities for everybody to develop a nice smooth alliance that can get those really nice choreographed matches.
Yeah.
Jesse, did you guys have a pick list because you guys were higher ranked earlier in the day? Do you guys have a pick list going into the day? We
always have a pick list. It doesn't matter if we're 60th.
That's good though. I should say, did you was 422 the next on your list, or was it just like as when you and your partners got together, you realized you need someone like them?
Give me a second. I can tell you.
Tabulating. Let's consult with the mainframe here and see what we got.
Yeah, I'm with you, Jesse. No matter what, my team has a list too. In the event that somebody has a good schedule and maybe either doesn't have the resources to scout or just doesn't have their list in order, I want to be there with a list to help them out.
Being on 190, and I'm sure, having a low number and being an old team, a few times we've gotten they're old, they know what to do, we'll pick them, and then we'll have the next robot before. And it's a valid idea if you don't know where to go, right? If the robot's pretty good and they've got a pick list and you don't have any other option, it's not the worst. We've done pretty okay with that a couple of times though. Jesse, any results from the Oracle?
Yeah, 422 was top 5 switch overall, both offense and defense, and then they were top 5 total cubes as well. So even the robots that outscaled them, they were able to place many more cubes into the switch. So if you think about it, scale versus opponent switch, they could effectively swing a match by negating whatever the opponent did on the scale.
Nice. All right. Well, I think we're gonna move on from this particular discussion for now. In closing, though, I want to say, Jesse, congratulations one more time on your team's achievement. And real quick, I want to kind of pose it to you. What do you guys think your experience at the championship is going to look like? Do you guys think that you're going to end up being able to seed high, or do you think you're gonna sneak in at the 8th seed again and make your way to Einstein?
It depends on the schedule. Last year we had a reasonable schedule and hit 5th seed, so that was pretty nice. I know my team needs to work on a couple of things. We need to keep evaluating our logging data. It seemed like our elevator is slow, so I don't know if it'll seed high necessarily. I do know that we have a couple of things up our sleeve for improvement that don't drastically change anything about our robot, but just make minor tweaks that really set us up. And so I think if I take what happened with 1st seed, I think they would do that pick again. I think if I scale it up to what happens at championship, I think we'll have to 1885 will have to position ourselves to be a 2nd pick and be the best 2nd pick available, because like I said, we don't have the strongest autonomous, but we have a great teleop opener. So I think that's where I see us in the metagame at champs.
Cool. I think looking at your matches and seeing how you guys perform, that's kind of my thought as well. Is you guys are going to be like a dope 2nd pick for if depending on how deep the division is, you guys may end up taking a ride with a high seed, or you may end up being a huge power player in a mid-level seed. So really good luck there. Hope everything works out pretty well. Hope everything goes good. So
thank you.
We're going to move on to our next topic here for the day. We're going to talk a little bit about defense. Jesse, you talked about it earlier. We talked about it a lot last week, but there was another district championship that happened. It was even before Chesapeake. There was in Israel. The Israel district championship happened this past weekend as well. And during the finals, we saw some pretty bonkers, crazy defense happening going on over there. So I want to finally, yes. We got the video up here. This is final match number 1 here. And what you're going to see eventually is Blue Alliance is going to get trapped on one side of the field by a single Red Alliance robot. So kind of watch this video as we talk about this a little bit here. The key takeaway I saw in this is that there's a lot of obstacles on the field, and it's very easy to get yourself stuck in a position where you don't want to be. So where have you guys seen this in the matches that you guys have played or seen played recently? Ty, I know that you guys had some interesting sort of findings at your event last week.
We got they got us good. I've been trying to push my drivers to handle cubes right up until the last second, whether or not it's the last second before they need to climb or the last second before the match ends. So 30 seconds, 30 seconds in. Oh, here we go. Is 1690 is basically trapped down here now.
You'll notice in the lower left corner, they're just stuck.
Yep. So with 30 seconds left, and we were all out of cubes in the field, so I sent my drivers down to the portal to go grab it. Unfortunately, they snuck through the opponent's null territory, got down there. There was a robot between us and the portal, and then another robot came in between us and the null territory, and it was the last 30 seconds, so the only way that we could go through was their platform zone. And we had already won the match, so we just sat there and didn't give them free climbs and stuff. But like in the last 30 seconds is going to be like this really crazy game of robot tag.
Yeah, some of this switching back to this match, some of this positional D I'm seeing out of this Red Alliance robot it's pretty textbook, but it's probably the best executed I've seen of positional D so far this year. I mean, part of it is the fact that pathway right around the opponent's switch is really, really, really small, but also there's a little bit of what looks like, I'm going to call it panic from orbit here. Yeah. They're trying to put cubes on their side of the opponent's switch, but they don't go drive around. They don't drive around the other way. They're like laser focused on putting that cube on, which is not necessarily the best thing here. I mean, obviously it looks like they don't quite have the scale in most of this match here. Yep. And I don't know, if you're Orbit, what do you guys do here?
So this is like a thing that happened that I've heard of. I'm not from the Air Force, but I know people who were. And this is what you call like target fixation, right? You get so focused on where you're trying to go you literally only see a tiny sliver of what's going on, and you can't see anything else, right? The most obvious situation for blue to do, so you're stuck here, right? And hopefully after a few seconds, you're stuck here. So the only real way you can get out is by going around, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you're going to lose vision of your robot at some point, but you have to escape from where you are now, because right now you're doing absolutely nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So really what I would do if I'm blue is I go all the way around and I gamble that I can get through the null territory on the other side and take the technical foul if I have to, because otherwise you're just nothing, right? Like negative 25 points is better than not being able to do anything.
Yeah, and I think honestly though, I think that this is like a little bit of a mistake from 1690, but also this is like very, very good defense from 70-79 here. And
yes.
I always say that defense is always about being where your opponents want to be. If you and whether you need to push them in order to get there, or you just turn your robot sideways and let them run into you. They're doing an awesome job here. I bet you their motors weren't even warm after this, because they're just doing a great job of turning sideways when they need to be and just pushing them into a wall if they're trying to sneak by. This is like really, really great defense, and it really locks out a key player for this Blue Alliance.
Yeah. So Jesse, when you guys were at your event, did anybody end up playing that game? I know the finals didn't really end up going that way, but you mentioned it earlier for like the quarterfinals and some of the other matches you guys played.
I know it happened to us in our semifinals match, where 55-46 effectively locked us down there. We wanted to come back to the scale, and I realized that it wasn't going to happen, at least not easily. So we basically faked them into thinking we were trying to go for their switch, because where we would have placed was also right there. So we dove in, basically almost had a beat on it, drove around them, and we wound up not needing to go back to the scale by the time we actually got around them. But it was just kind of a fake out. Like, we go in acting like we're going for the switch, they took it, and then we could come back around.
Mm-hmm.
We saw a little bit of that, I think, at some of our district events as well, where teams go down there, and like 11-11 played D on us at our district event, and could definitely shove us around a little bit. Anytime you go down there to the portal, this field is very closed off, and especially teams who were here last year, who did FRC last year, they might not actually have experienced that before, because last year was pretty open.
Yeah, last year the only real way to truly defend somebody would basically be to try to chicken climb, basically like pin them behind your airship at the end of the match, at least on one side, and see if they freak out and hit one of your partners. That was basically the most defense ever happened. But
yeah.
And this year, 2014, a game that had a lot of defending going on, is kind of like the kind of defending I enjoy the least, which is generally sort of the like push you, bang you around, make you go places. But this one is somewhere between something completely different we haven't seen a lot and something we saw like in 2013, right?
Yeah.
So Nick, you obviously were there a lot. You were on a team that won the World Championship in 2013, which I found out last week. But that was my bad. But in 2013, a lot of the times it's just trying to chip your opponent, like chip them as they come out of the loading zones, slow them down for a few seconds at a time, and see if you can just slow them down by just one cube.
I mean, your 2013 was all about trying to reduce the number of successful cycles a team runs. I mean, and that's a lot of those are the same here. Sure, an individual cube doesn't earn points, whereas individual frisbees did. But a lot of that, especially midway and later in a match where you're running portal cycles, a lot of that still holds true here. I totally see the parallel here, Francis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because while a cube might not score you points, it does keep you up. It does keep you in pace with the opposing alliance, and
yes,
that's the whole point, right? Is to either get the scale and then keep pace with them, or outpace them to get the scale back. And if you can slow down the opposing alliance, it just makes your job that much easier. One thing that I think that is very ineffective, and I hope a lot of teams don't do, unless they're playing us, then sure, we'll take the tech files. Is the defense around the null territory. We've found that you can't be in our null territory, which means you have to be on either side, and if you're on one side, we'll just go get the cubes from the other side, and it just becomes this, like we say, defense is being where your opponents want to be. There's too many options to defend around your opponent's null territory. You need to basically, once they get there, you need to defend them while they're outside of it. And
yeah,
I think defense is going to be hard to come by until teams can get away, or until teams exhaust those 12 cubes that sit behind the switches.
Yeah, and actually, if you guys were watching the Troy District event this weekend, we were watching it. I was watching it. Clinton was on from 2337 was there.
Right.
They went for the portal very early to make sure they got cubes from the portal when they knew they were available, because they weren't going to get defended. And at some point, a couple of times, they got trapped in that portal zone, like we saw earlier too. But the good news is they'd already gotten 4 cubes out of the portal. And so their other scale robot was able to fish out cubes from their own center line or from their opponent's center line to try to keep the scale even or win the scale for their alliance. So it was a good move on their part to do that. Emerson, your crew, you guys practice a lot. How do you guys practice against defense, or do you guys practice trying to trap people? Is that something you guys play around with a lot, or?
Yeah, I mean, we have robots running around all the time. We typically will have either our backup driver for the year, or we have like a bunch of mentors that were FRC drivers back in their time. They get to like relive their glory days in the shop.
It is so much fun. It is so much fun.
And so, yeah, we definitely practice against any type of defense we think we're going to see. And so we've spent some time doing drills like that, where, trapping in an area, or, just being on someone all the time, wherever they are, you're right there. And we, try and run drills like that, once we're in a point where we feel like we have our game down pretty solidly, right? So we don't just like jump right into defense drills, like right when the drivers start driving. We try to give them a little bit of time to feel comfortable, and then start adding that in as the time goes on. But it's hard to recreate stuff like that, even if you practice. It's really hard to recreate the feeling, the intensity of a match, and exactly what people are going to do, because especially when we send our defensive bots out in our shop, it's like, okay, their only goal is to play defense on us. In a lot of matches, even when you have a team playing defense, they're going to have another role that they want to do too. So at some point, they're going to be trying to do something else. And so it's hard to kind of recreate all the magic in here, but we do practice a lot against defense. I don't think that, that makes us experts or any better than anybody else, but I mean, we do try.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the most effective ways to play against defense this year is to, as a coach, try and have 2 different goals for the robot at any point. So if you're trying to get cubes, then try to have 2 places that you can get cubes, so that if you're defended on one, you can split and head down the other fork of the road. It's not always possible, but basically, if you're getting defended and you get target fixation, like Francis was saying, then you lost. Sorry.
Yeah.
Rip.
When it comes to practicing defense, this is kind of a soapbox moment. When it comes to practicing defense, one of the most effective things I've learned to do, if you have the resources to have multiple robots, is defend your own robot for a while. Send your primary drivers to go play with the defense bot and defend your own robot. And you find the weaknesses that maybe there's it's ways to hit a robot, or there's certain spots to obviously sit in front that your robot can't deal with, and you learn, okay, this is how I defend my own robot. This is what I'm gonna see. Mm-hmm. I've always found that to be super effective. Obviously, it requires the resources to have multiple robots that you guys do, Adrian, to be able to do that. But
it was a world. To be fair, a lot of teams have 2 robots these days.
No,
would say most
I mean the multiple robots around their shop, not just their 2018 robot.
That's true. That's true.
I learned this lesson the hard way in 2011. That played against my own robot, and it really made a world of a difference of where we could be defended. I totally believe in that.
Cool. All right. Well, any last words on defense before we move on? Just one last thing as well. If you're in the chat and you have a question for us or you have something that you want us to talk about, type it in the chat with !Q followed by your question, and we'll answer it live on air. We're coming toward the end of the show, getting toward the lightning round, so get those questions in. I see we got one from Bartholomew asking if I'm good at PUBG. We'll leave that for later. We'll figure that out later, I guess. All right, so I want to move on a little bit and talk about another topic here. So I've had the opportunity to talk with my buddy Dave McLaughlin and some other people. Dave was on the show last week, and he expressed that he didn't like some aspects of the game so far. And this kind of goes to what Jesse was talking about earlier. Getting that early game lead or getting those first 2 cubes in the first 10 seconds really matter. And so I want to hear from the rest of you guys. Is this game snowbally? Does it snowball? And if so, is it bad that it does that? And if it's bad, does that make this a bad game? Jesse, I want to hear what your thoughts are, because you kind of talked about this earlier.
I mean,
don't have to give all the hot takes, but
the cheesy poofs have almost broken the game.
But just being good.
3 cubes into anything, is pretty insane, and then
gonna lock that up.
Acquire the 4th in autonomous. But so that anomaly aside, I think the strategies are still evolving, and I think I saw a comment about wondering whether or not is autonomous such a critical thing that a good start to teleop can't overcome it. And I think we saw at the Silicon Valley finals, in the finals matches, not quite. You have to play almost a perfect game, but I think on Einstein we'll see some perfect games where you might be down, or you might see 3 cubes in the scale, on both sides, at which point there are approximately half a dozen cubes remaining in the middle, which then starts to draw out your strategies into your mid-game designed robots. So that's where you might see some of your early game designed robots like mine kind of taper off and really need to find better roles.
Right. I like this game a lot. I like games or matches where the alliances are pretty evenly matched. But what those kind of matches bring out is if all those robots are good, and you might see this on Einstein, all those robots are good, it's not a game of who's good, it's a game of who messes up the least. Very, very similar to 2015, where whoever made the least mistakes won. And sure, that makes sense for a bunch of FRC games, but there are more recoverable ways in previous games where you could make some mistakes and you could adapt on the fly pretty quickly to make up for it. This one, dropped cubes are going to be the thing at the championship that decides who goes to Einstein and who's watching from the stands. And that scares me a little bit. That might be the only thing I dislike about this game.
Yeah, it's actually a lot like the 2014 game to a certain extent. Now,
yeah,
we saw that in some matches and not others. We saw it, for example, a lot at the Chessy Champs final matches, where getting behind by a half a cycle or missing a single shot makes it so you just can't win unless the opponent misses a shot at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Now it doesn't make it an auto lose necessarily, because in 2014 at least, because the other team can still mess up. But the problem with this year's game is that if you're behind and you make that miss, maybe if your opponent misses as well, you're even, but that delta in time is still points being scored for your alliance.
Yes.
You're still going way up ahead. And this is something I'm a little surprised we haven't talked about yet, is that this game has a point of no return point, right? There's a if you're really cool, you could put it in your driver station that just see how many points you've got, and at a certain point, you can't lose. They can't come back, and just stop driving. Just wherever you are on the field, just stop moving because the game's over, right?
Park next to that gate.
Go park next to the gate. Yeah, the old swag strat, right?
Oh man, I scared the crap out of my drivers because they park next to the gate. during one match, and I was like, "Oh no, you got to move!" And they freaked out and they drive really far away from the gate, and I'm like, "Why?" They were like, "What are you yelling for?" I was like, "Oh, the ramp was gonna fall and hit the robot as soon as they opened."
Oh man, no man, you get some negative rep for that in Chief Delphi.
It was a practice match.
I know. Oh, practice match, no biggie.
Yeah.
All right. So I still like the game. I think that that the snowball effect is real. I think that having control of the scale early is incredibly important. But this is going to kind of lead into our next topic real quick. Is that I'm really excited to see district championships because more district championships, I should say, because we've seen a taste of what happens when you get a bunch of really high-level, highly skilled robots together and teams together. But most of the regionals and most of the district events we've seen so far have had 1, 2, or 3 good scale bots. And when that happens, you get 2 of the good scale bots on one alliance, one guy with his buddies who can't compete with those first 2, and they just get wiped out at a lot of events. Mm-hmm. I think that when you get to district championship, the top end is deep enough that you'll have 2 or 3 of those alliances, and you'll actually be able to see them compete against each other to see what happens.
Yeah, and I think the thing that really fascinates me about this game is that the better the scale game gets, the more important the rest of the game gets. Because if you have 2 evenly matched scale teams, that scale is going to be worth less and less points for each alliance. For example, there was a match at UNH where 15-19 and 3-19 went out, and I think there was a total of 60 scale points spread across both red and blue alliances, and that match was essentially won with vault, switch, and climbing. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that come these district championships, where you have more parity and you have a higher chance of some alliances that can have really even scale games.
So, Jesse, this is something that I've kind of been watching this year as well. A lot of the CHS district events had some peculiar advancements where you see like lower number seeds winning the event or in the finals, kind of like we saw district championship. Is this a symptom of what I described earlier, or is there something else afoot with what you guys are up to?
I know alliances pick. They're looking for the one thing, and I tell my scouts as a drive coach, this is what I would want my alliance to be. And I guess I don't know, as we progress through the season much further towards world championships, whether a switch only bot is going to be in eliminations as anything but a backup robot. 71-79 aside, because they literally can take, unless you can have that driver skill where you can take cubes from your opponents and use them against them, I don't think there's really room for a switch bot. You kind of need the versatility because you don't necessarily know going into a match what will happen. So I think the lower seeds in Chesapeake being on the finalist alliance was because they were actually good at one aspect of the game and they fit our strategies. But I don't know that will carry over as we keep going.
All right, cool. So we're going to move on to our final topic before the lightning round. So again, last call for questions one more time. Get it in there. We'll be answering them real quick, real soon. So what I want to talk about quick is our predictions for what the rest of district championships are going to look like. We've got this week, we've got coming up the Pacific Northwest District Championship, which is the biggest of the bunch. Georgia is also this week, but Pacific Northwest is a 60-team event. They've got a full 3 days. They've got a lot of really incredible robots out there. I kind of want to hear what you guys have to say as to what these alliances are going to look like. Are we going to see it be very similar to what we saw at CHS, or are people going to try to build them differently, you think?
And going when you're a district team and you go from playing a around 32 team event to having to jump to double the event size, that's tough. That is really tough to keep track of who's who, at least from a scouting perspective. That's probably going to be the biggest challenge you see in the PNW, is trying to keep every robot straight when you basically double the thickness of your scouting binder. So I can see some mistakes happening where some robots that are really good they get left out because you can't keep everything in your binder straight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've been to 2 pretty big events this year. We were actually just joking that Dallas was about the same size that our division is going to be this year.
Oh, wow.
Oh, jeez.
And but it's totally true. Like you get in this scouting meeting, you got 62 teams, and they all do kind of like start to just blend together. And how do you distinguish between robots? Once you're getting down to the lower picks in the draft, how do you distinguish between these robots? When you only have 8 robots left and you're the number 1 alliance, usually there's one that kind of stands out. But when there's just a whole bunch of them that are, for all intents and purposes, kind of the same, it's really hard to start distinguishing teams. And but as far as district champs goes, I know we're going to be watching Pacific Northwest down here pretty carefully since we're going to be competing against all those teams pretty soon. I think that, and of course I'm the only one in here. I don't understand districts. I don't know anything about them. I have no insight into this whole thing. But but at least from my perspective, being an outsider, it's like you get to this competition where everyone's just a little bit better. District champs are the only event. I was thinking about this in the car today. That it's the only event in first right now that you have to qualify to go to, so based on robot performance, right? And so these district championships, I mean, this is a big deal. This is really good robots. They're all there for a reason. And so I think it's totally possible that what happened over in Chesapeake happens, in these other district champs. You get these really strong alliances at the bottom of the draft that every robot has basically the same capability, and you can be really flexible with your strategies versus having to say, okay, only the number 1 pick is going to do the scale and you're going to stay on the switch. Now sometimes that's great because you stay out of each other's way, you all have a goal, but sometimes, and I think especially in this game, flexibility can be good. And so these lower seeded alliance that maybe have a more well-rounded alliance, I think are going to put up a fight at least.
Yeah, we've mentioned a couple of times that rushing 3 robots to the scale to try and get caught up and get an early lead, or get caught up from auto or get an early lead. I think that's still a strong strategy, and I think we might see that more at district champs because you'll probably have a 6 or 7 seed with 3 capable scale robots, and then all 3 drop a cube onto the scale, and then the 2 maintain it.
Yeah, and my big thing is I'm really, I think, excuse me, I this is what I get for reading chat at the same time. My bad. Adrian, you put up a great point there, talking about, or Adrian and Nick, about teams getting lost in the shuffle at these huge events. And I think that Jesse, we on Chief Delphi read there were some teams that were a little surprised that they ended up not getting picked. And in New England, that happens every year, basically, at the district championship, that somebody ends up like not picking somebody when they, or no one ends up picking one of these great robots. And it's like, oh my gosh, they were like an alliance captain at one of their district events. They made it to semifinals and they didn't get picked to championships. How'd that happen? And the answer is there's only 24 robots that make it into the draft. And there might be 26 or 28 robots that deserve it at these huge level events. And the other thing that, Adrian, you hit this nail right on the head that I kind of want to touch on quick is I am really eager to see district championships. I am less eager to see the championship divisions because and it's not that they're going to be bad. They're going to be fun. It's going to be great. It's going to be huge. It's just that not having everybody have to be a top robot performer or have the vast majority of the field be a top robot performer to make it to the championship. We see it all the time that championship fields end up being less powerful than regular the district championships. This year it's going to be accelerated because if the random lottery puts like what you guys had last year on 148 in your division, if it's like you guys, 1 or 2 other teams, and then a bunch of robots that are in the middle, it's going to play out significantly differently than what we saw in like Newton a couple of years ago, where there's all these great teams. That everybody says that is going to be a bloodbath. This year is going to be a giga bloodbath if we end up with those kind of divisions.
Well, and especially, I know all you guys are headed up to Detroit. So in Houston, we have significantly less spots that are given to district teams at the Houston event. And so I think it's even more like compounded down here because you have such a significant number that are either coming off the wait list or basically not coming from districts, where they really had to have a certain level of robot success on the field to get to the world championship. And so, I'm worried that we're gonna get a Newton and 5 other divisions. Now, Newton did not win the world championship in 2016. We all got to remember that. But still, I am anxiously waiting to kind of see how it shakes out down here because it'll probably determine a lot of what happens.
Yeah. Well, Adrian reminded us that 2 weeks from today, we'll probably be seeing divisions for Houston came out, which made me almost fall over and faint, but it's coming up fast.
Yeah, a week from today should be that. And then, I just said 2 weeks from today, I'll be done with all my practice matches.
Oh my God!
This time, which is scary.
Championships going quick. All right, we're gonna move on to the lightning round. Last call for questions. We're gonna put up our first question here up on the board. Remember, type !Q followed by your question in the Twitch chat if you want to have us ask it. First up, this is from Max. He asks, "Does smooth and slow and smooth is slow is smooth and smooth is fast apply to playing defense?" Ty, this is your mantra, so I'm gonna shift this over to you.
All right. I think it still can. I think a team can play very effective defense by parking sideways and putting their controller parking sideways between the switch and the wall and putting their controller on the table. I get very frustrated when I find people that play defense that feel as though their robot needs to be moving all the time. If you are in the ideal defensive spot, then you don't need to move unless they move you out of the way. So I guess you could say that slow is smooth and smooth is fast in that aspect. But also, I think a lot more forethought needs to come into play when you're playing defense. You need to understand what the bot you're defending wants to do and basically be a step ahead of them. Okay, after they get this cube, they're going to want to come to the scale, so I need to be here, etc. So, it doesn't necessarily come into play as much on defense, I think, because slow and smooth is fast is all about execution. So, if you get the execution, then you're following the same mantra, but don't play defense slow.
Yeah, and Ty, I'm going to stress this one more time. If you've got somebody where you want them, don't move. Even if they play dead, just stay there. I've played dead on the field before, and they ran away, and then we win the match. Don't. Just stay there. Unless it's against 190, we're probably definitely dead. Absolutely not even faking it. Not even close. Never faking it. So we have another question coming in. Again, we're getting some more questions in, so I think we're going to put a couple of those other ones in. But our second question, that one's coming from one of our viewers. His name is Electronica1_, again with the underscores. He asks, does the RP from double climbs lead to some teams ranking much higher than really strong cube teams?
Yes. The last 2 Indiana events, we have seen a team, 1741, who is really, really, really good at getting ranking points in matches. They make sure the switch is owned, and they are really good at double climbing with people. And they are not, admittedly, they are not the best scale robot in Indiana. There are other robots who are better on the scale, and they rank high and they pick them. And I think you're going to see more of that, where a lot of these good scale robots, they spent their whole season on making sure they get the 2 cubes in the scale, and then they put climbing or buddy climbing off to the side because they were focusing on their skill game first. And that's totally true with, 1747 Harrison Buller Robotics is probably the best example of that. They are without a doubt the best scale robot in Indiana, and they don't climb because they spent their season focusing on that. and they get picked early because they're really good at the scale, but they don't rank high as these buddy climbing robots do.
I always call it the Beatty strategy. Like back in the ye old days of First, before
Get your walker,
mode.
Francis.
Yeah. To be fair, I wasn't quite in this. One of us on this call was, but I'm not gonna say who. But like, okay. But like before autonomous mode, you just start with your joysticks out, right? Beatty's robot in 2002 did not rank well because they did not have any ability to get any of the bonus ranking points. But they were by far the best robot, so they got picked by the #1 seed, and then they just crushed everybody, right?
Yep.
So it's kind of that similar strategy. Now 254, like Jesse was saying, has broken the game. They built a game break. They may have built a game breaking robot just by doing the game real good. And kind of doing this, I guess. But what do the rest of you guys think? Do you think that that there's any hope for these high scale robots to take the #1 seed away, even at maybe championship where there might see, or just championship where you see more buddy climbers going on?
Well, sorry, go ahead.
So one thing to remember is that a win is worth 2 ranking points, and then you can only get the other 2 ranking points. Oh, sorry, and then like a buddy climb is only worth 1. So yeah, I think that the best scale bot may not always rank #1, but they're always going to be up there. I think if the best scale bot's going to win the most matches. It's not going to be the best buddy climb bot or the best autonomous switch bot.
Yeah, I mean, Nick gave an example of what's happening in Indiana, but I think if I've seen around at other events, if you look at ranking, there are not a significant number of teams that have an average ranking score above 3. And there are even less that have a 3, like a high above 3, like above like 3.3 or 3.4. And I think right now, a lot of the people that have really good buddy climbers also are pretty good robots in other aspects of the game. And I'm not saying that it's everyone, but I think that there are some exceptions to the rule. But I actually think that the ranking has been pretty good at the events that we've been at least, and the ones that I've watched. I think this is actually one of the better rankings to come out of the game, because the winning the match, obviously you got to do that first. Auton, the ranking point Auton is not as hard as a lot of the other ranking points we've had in the past few years. And so people are pretty good at giving that, even if they're not winning matches, they're getting that ranking point. But the face of the boss ranking point is hard. It's probably the hardest ranking point we've had in a long time. And so I think that it does a pretty good job of the ranking point system does a good job of seeding this year. I think so.
Okay. All right, we're going to move on to our. I think we're going to do our final question for the night here. This one comes in from 1836 Marcus. He or she asks, do Switch Vault specialists really have a place on championships and elimination alliances? Jesse, you kind of touched on this. What's your final call? What's your final word on this topic?
I think you need to be able to drive blind down the field to be able to be an excellent Switch Vault bot. You're going to be the second pick, most likely, not necessarily guaranteed, which will put you in the right driver station, which then means when your the switch you have to attack downfield is on the opposite side of the field, it's kind of blind for you. You have to see through the tower. Otherwise, you're stuck at home defending your own switch. And maybe your alliance can work that out. But I think kind of what we've seen in several matches is versatility can really help. And if you're stuck at home, and that will leave your partners to go attack the far switch, which may remove them off the scale. And if you're great in autonomous, then that will work. But if you're behind after autonomous, then I don't think that will work.
The one kind of difference here, though, Jesse, at the championship is because you're running 4-team alliances, you can probably combat some of that sightline issues that you get to pick your driver stations with the lineup cards at the championship. So maybe that's kind of a plus for those Vault Switch robots, where you can form your alliance such that your Vault Switch robot has a good view. to go play the opponent's switch. And I think that's going to be a big deal that a lot of people will miss.
Yeah, that's true. And I'll say this, and I kind of have been saying this since the beginning a little bit, but it's one of the realities you kind of face is that if you're a good scale bot, generally,
I don't know if you can face that anymore.
You could be a good scale, a good switch robot and a good exchange bot, right? If you do the scale good, it means you pick up cubes good. It means you move cubes good. It means you deliver cubes good. And those are all things that you need when you're doing the other tasks to the game, right? So at the championship, you will end up seeing robots that specialize in the switch and the scale, the switch and the exchange. But these are going to be kind of teams that also do the switch, also the scale real good. And it's just like what Jesse was saying with 422. They actually had the ability to do the scale quite well. But you'll see at a lot of district and regional events is that by the time you get to the 24th pick, 23rd pick, 22nd pick, all you've got left is the robots that are only able to go low and touch and do the switch and the exchange. So that's why I think you see a lot of these specialist robots winning events and doing well, is because you got nothing else to pick from. That's what you're going to get, right? And this kind of goes back to what Jesse was saying, is that if you're real good at the switch and the scale, or excuse me, at the switch and the exchange, I keep saying that, switch and the exchange, you could actually have a spot, kind of like your buddies, Adrian, 70. Oh shoot, I forgot.
71 Beatty Crunch.
Yes, Beatty Crunch. Yes. 7179. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot them. Yeah. Anybody else have any last things before we move on to our final question?
I mean, to be honest, I would rather have a very good switch and exchange bot than a. I would rather have a very good switch and exchange bot than a okay scale bot.
I'm with you, Ty, 100%.
Oh, I agree, but I think an okay scale bot is a good exchange and switch bot.
Yeah, but let me put it this way, like just because of the person that's asking the question, I would rather have I'd rather have an 1836 that can handle all 12 cubes and then have time to spare, and then someone who can maybe do, like 6 or 7 cubes in the switch and the exchange. I'd rather have someone that is just like absolutely elite at that than someone who's like maybe 3 or 4 cubes on the scale.
Yeah, I'm with you, because I'm gonna have that robot not fill the vault in 50 seconds. I'm gonna have them split their time between locking teams down in the portal, holding them for a few seconds, and then going and back to the vault, just to slow down my opponents on their cycle time. That's what I'm looking for that kind of alliance.
Well, I guess, how do you know that they are capable of doing that if they've proven that they're very good at the switch in the vault? How do you know that they can lock down an opponent? Because that's a different skill set.
If they can fill the vault in 50 seconds, they probably have the skill set to put I'm going to make the assumption that they have the skill set to be able to put the robot where they want to.
Well, they've got to have proved it, right? Because if they can fill the vault in 50 seconds, they proved that. And then what else do you do with the extra 100 seconds in this game?
I'm making an assumption here, is what I'm saying.
Right,
I'm not saying that.
But I'm saying you don't have to make an assumption. If they're a robot that consistently fills the vault in 50 seconds, then they've got the rest of the match to play, and they must have proved it by then.
I see.
That's true. I haven't really seen many teams that do that and then kind of wander, which is my favorite thing. My favorite comment to put in scouting is kind of like, well, they wandered the field for a minute and a half. But
job's done.
I'm done. Yeah. All right. Well,
we have some of that.
We're going to go to one absolute real deal, final, last, ultimate, penultimate, definitely maybe the last one. It's the final question. Coming to us from @Azatoth__. He asks, why does Francis still hate the superior collectible card game Hearthstone? This is false. Hearthstone is not the superior collectible card game. It's actually Magic the Gathering. So that's it. Case closed. Sorry about that, Azatoth. Sorry to have to shut you down. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for watching, even you, Azatoth. It was a great show. I want to give a big thanks to Jesse for joining us tonight. Jesse, congratulations one more time. And thank you so much for being on our show this evening.
Thank you.
Last couple things. If you like this show, remember to follow us here on Twitch or subscribe to us on YouTube. You can also find us on Twitter and on Facebook if you want to get all the latest updates from us. And Recently, this past Sunday and Monday morning, we released our first hardware product ever. It's the Rainbow Light, brought to you by RSN. So make sure you check that out on our Facebook page. Really is useful this year, especially in the event of any unintended water distribution during the game at the championship again this year. But that being said, follow us on Facebook and Twitter. If you really like what we do and want to support us, you can subscribe to us here on Twitch TV. It's just $5 a month, and if you have Amazon Prime, it's free. We have a wonderful sponsor in Symbotic that provides us all that we need, but every little bit helps, and it helps us do all of our live events like we do, like First Champ Live, like Chessy Champs, like IRI Live, like Beach Bliss this past year, and we couldn't do it without the support from everybody here. So if you have Twitch Prime, or if you want to support us, go ahead and hit that subscribe button here on Twitch. All right, everybody, thank you again. Good luck to everybody competing this week. Big good luck out there to Evan and Stephanie, who are competing at district championships right now. They're like loading in and getting the robot inspected as we speak. So everybody else out there, have fun this weekend, and we hope to see you next week at 9 p.m. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.